So, hello, my name is Ondřej Mirtes, and actually Prague is my hometown, so I'm local. So, who uses PHPStan? Okay, great. PHPStan helps you find bugs in your code without any effort, and it gets smarter with each new version. So today, I would like to introduce about what we've been working on for the past several months. And first, I would like to say that I'm really amazed about how PHPStan is popular and how it's getting useful for PHP developers around the world. And it's very rewarding and fulfilling to work on it. So I'm really happy about it. So it has over 1,250,000 downloads on Packagist, and it has been started over 3,900 times. So I really wouldn't have guessed that it would become this popular when I started working on it. And it's no longer a one-man show. I welcome two more very valuable core contributors, Honza Trdík and Lukáš Unger. Those are developers that I trust and can merge their pull requests without much scrutiny, because they send really awesome code to PHPStan, and they really know what they are doing. So these are two more core contributors that also work on PHPStan besides me. The most recent stable version is 0.9.2, and it's been 146 days since this last release. So it's been a really long time. That's the reason why 0.10 is going to be really huge. And the number of days since the last release actually correlates to the number of commits since the last release. So the new version will contain over 500 commits, and 0.10 has advancements on several fronts at once. So I will start by talking about type-specifying extensions. So what are those actually? Because it's a very mysterious name for this feature. So if you are already using PHPStan, you are probably aware that PHPStan doesn't have any way of knowing what's going on inside the assert instance of method. So the type of the variable in the current stable version remains unknown or the same after the call. So in the new version, you will be able to write an extension that tells PHPStan what type of an expression or variable is after this call. So it won't longer be unknown, but it will be of type foo in this case. And there are already written first-party extensions for the most common assertion libraries, like WebMozart assert or WebRelay assert. And also the PHP event extension was improved to also contain type-specifying extension for calls like assert instance of or another calls like this. But I would also like to encourage you to write your own type-specifying extension. So if you are using something, some method call like this, if you are certain that variable will be of a certain type after a call like this, you can write a custom type-specifying extension for this, and it's very easy. And if you have another situation like this, if you have a nullable getter, if you have a getter with a nullable type int, and you are first making sure that the value is going to be there, you are probably calling something like a has method. And actually PHPStan currently has no way of knowing that the has address and get address are connected in any way. So in the current version, PHPStan still complains that the get address, that the method getStreet can be called on a possibly nullable value in the on the highest level 7. But in the new version, you can write an extension that makes sure that if you are first checking that has address is true, then the get address will definitely return an address object. So that's why you should also write your own custom type-specifying extension. And last but not least, type-specifying extensions. This system actually ties well into detecting that you are asserting something, you are checking something that can actually never be true. So this already works in the current stable version with traditional instance of keyword and also with strict comparison operators, three equal signs. But in the new version, this will also work with all your custom type-specifying extensions. So PHPStan will point out if you are asserting something that doesn't make much sense. So next, constant values. These are also sometimes called literal values. So PHPStan can now understand not only types, but also values, sometimes values of expressions and variables, and make use of it. So currently, PHPStan is able to tell you if the number of placeholders and the number of past values does not match the number of placeholders. And until 0.10, in the current stable version, it only works if you put the format string directly into the sprintf call. But in 0.10, you can first assign the format string to a variable, and then pass it to a sprintf call, and PHPStan will be able to report to you that your call is still wrong. So it gets much smarter about the code. And that's not the only thing that constant values are bringing. So it's also able now to track undefined array offsets and report them back to you. And also it gets really smart about uncovering complex mistakes in a really tricky code. So the new development version of PHPStan actually helped us to find a completely nonsensical test that actually didn't test anything, because it was able to find out that we are unsetting an array offset that can never be defined. So if we look at this code through PHPStan eyes, we see this. So PHPStan is able to replace the array keys call with actually what's going to be the result of the array keys call, and it's able to figure out that the removed key is going to be either letter A or letter B, and there's no key like this in the keys variable, so it's able to tell that you are unsetting something that isn't there. So it's really smart about the code. And constant values can also be used to know how many items are in an array, and also involving conditions. So in this case, PHPStan knows that count array will always return either 3 or 4, so it can work with this value. So in this case, it will tell you that you are comparing either 3 or 4 against 5, and that also will always be false. So it will help you uncover some tricky mistakes like this. Next, we also improved support for callables. So finally, PHPStan is able to check calls of anonymous functions. So in this case, it will point out that you are missing argument going into the anonymous function. And that's not everything, because there are 4 kinds of callables in PHP. There are strings. You can either represent a function or a method using a string. You can also represent instance methods using arrays, and of course anonymous functions, and also objects with invoke. And PHPStan is now able to recognize all of these callables. So it's now, for example, able to tell you which string is a valid callable and which isn't. So if you pass an invalid unknown function to somewhere where callable is expected, it's able to tell you that the string isn't a valid callable. So in the second case, it will tell you that deity is not a valid function in case you didn't define it. PHPStan is able to connect all of these information together in very complex code. So, for example, if we are passing an object somewhere callable is expected, and the object has invoke method with a type hint. It's able to connect all of this, and in this case, it will know that the bars variable is gonna contain array of bar objects because it connected the invoke type hint with actually with the correct function call. So it's now probably smarter than your favorite IDE because, for example, PHPStorm is not able to figure this out what PHPStan is. Next, PHPStan relies a lot on built-in PHP reflection, but there's a problem because PHP reflection contains a lot of inconsistent information, and it also doesn't contain all of data that we would like it to, because PHP reflection data and implementation isn't actually connected in any way. It's not synchronized in PHP internals. So this is actually what you see when you ask PHP reflection for the data. But we finally added this data to PHPStan. We actually got the data that are maintained and shared by PHP community from other static analyzers like Fan or Psalm, and used it in PHPStan. And I already found a lot of errors in these maintained data and contributed them back to the other analyzers with fixes. And this analysis can become quite brutal because some functions can return false in case of some rare error, like when a file doesn't exist, or it's locked, or there's some disk error. So file get contents can return false, but in real world code, developers usually don't check for these errors. So if you upgrade PHPStan to a new version, and you are using either level 6 or level 7, you will probably be overwhelmed by the number of errors reported by built-in functions, because we are now using the native signatures. So if you find yourself in this situation, you can probably lower your level temporarily to at least 5, and so that you can upgrade your PHPStan to a new version without a problem. And eventually you should handle these errors in your code, and then you can start using higher level again. Okay. So who uses PHPStan strict rules? Okay, almost no one. So PHPStan itself is about finding objective bugs in your code that are always true for any PHP code base. But as you probably know, PHP is very benevolent and also tries to guess your intentions. So it's very unsafe to use only equal operator, because then, for example, a string containing 0 will be equal to false. So you should always use three equal operator. And there are other situations like this. Even when you are not comparing against some other value using two equal operator, you can get yourself in the situation like this. So for example, if you are using empty for validation, if you are asking, is this string empty, then you have a problem, because user will not be able to fill value 0 into your form, because empty will return false. And there's a lot of situations like this. So PHPStan strict rules will recommend you to pass only booleans in your conditions, and it will also tell you that you should use only numeric operands for your arithmetic operations. So it will make sure that you are not adding together two strings or some other weird values. And it will also force you to use third parameter strict for some functions like in array, which will also force you to use strict comparisons. So PHPStan strict rules is about additional rules for your strictly and strongly typed code, so that you are not using any loose casting and you want additional safety in defensive programming. And that's not everything, because there are literally hundreds of other improvements and bug fixes in the latest version of PHPStan. So when is it going to be released? Well, I have good news for you. It's going to be released next week. Okay?